It's Ingrid once again. Welcome to the Week 19 update of Ingrid and Ethan's 2024 Big Year. The pre-dawn hours of May 5th found us with our car pointed toward the Portland Jetport for a flight to Miami with a connection through JFK, because you seemingly can't fly anywhere directly from Portland. Once in our rental car, we headed for Crandon Park in South Miami, where Indian peafowl, aka peacocks, are reliably seen. Crandon is a fairly large park, and it took us a bit of time and detective work to find the shady spot where they were resting to avoid the hot Miami sun. We had a second thrilling view of them 10 minutes later when we returned to find one displaying and fanning his magnificent tail. Fun fact, according to Wikipedia, the Indian peafowl's loud call in forested areas often indicates the presence of a predator, such as a tiger. And we did hear one calling. Our next stop was a return trip to a park we visited in February, and the second attempt to find yellow chevroned parakeets. We had learned that they like to eat the fruit of fig trees, but being from northern New England, where pretty much the only fruit trees are apple, we had no idea what fig trees look like. Google took care of that, and soon we found the birds high up munching on figs. The yellow chevroned parakeet marked bird number 500 for our big year. That evening, we added orange-winged parrots and white-eyed parakeets to our year list in another park, straining to hear the birds over tennis and basketball games. Urban birding is unique. Monday morning, we left the city heading north, weighing the odds. Birding is not unlike placing a bet. We weigh the odds and cross our fingers. Then we recalculate the odds as information comes in. Do we put our money on the finicky and unreliable yellow-headed caracara, a bird we had dipped on in February, or the newly found rare white-cheeked pintail at a location reported to be inaccessible on weekdays? Choosing the pintail for its proximity to another rare bird, the shiny cowbird, we headed in its direction. Following earlier reports and the helpful tips of another birder we encountered, we found the shiny cowbirds on the grounds of a rice mill, near, of course, a dumpster. Unfortunately, we were not as lucky with the white-cheeked pintails, despite our best efforts at scoping the enormous flooded farm field for well over an hour.
Oh, I see nothing.
Tuesday found us on our way to Key West, where we would be staying the night before taking the ferry to Dry Tortugas National Park the next day. Along the way, there were a few birds we hoped to add to our year list. Our most wished-for sightings included black-whiskered vireo, white-crowned pigeon, and the red jungle fowl. Basically, wild chickens that breed in such numbers that they are countable in a big year. Ethan had done his research as usual and learned that all three species could be found at a park in Isla Morada on our route through the Keys. While early risers did laps in the pool, jogged, and set out to fish, we looked through the trees for birds. We found both the vireo and the pigeon, but the jungle fowl was AWOL. No worries, we had several other places to check along the route. Fingers crossed, we would find it at one of those. The day was very hot and humid, and we had exhausted our supply of water, so a stop was required if we were going to keep ourselves from wilting too much. No sooner had we pulled into a Publix parking lot when a red jungle fowl walked by. We jumped out of the car with our cameras. Passers-by chuckled in what appeared to be mocking disbelief as we photoed and videoed what turned out to be not one, but several jungle fowl. It wasn't long before we discovered the reason for these people's mirth. These wild chickens wander the streets and parking lots of the Keys in equal numbers to gulls at a New England McDonald's plaza. That is to say, they are everywhere and are kind of a pest. Thus, it wasn't long before we had all three of our priority birds for the day and could take our time a bit and enjoy the scenery. If you have ever been to the Florida Keys, you too, no doubt, have been in awe of the crystal clear turquoise water, beautiful sand beaches, and lush habitat. Nightjars are a rather mysterious class of nocturnal birds that feed on insects caught in the air. They are generally medium-sized, with short bills and legs, but with long wings. These include whippoorwills, peruki, and nighthawks. They are sometimes referred to as goat suckers due to an old myth that they drink the blood of goats. The Antillean nighthawk lives almost exclusively on the Florida Keys. Tuesday evening, we found 4 of them near the Key West airport. We enjoyed watching them chase each other and snatching bugs out of the air, at least those that weren't biting us, that is. Wednesday was a big day for us. Our trip to the Dry Tortugas was planned many months ago. The national park is legendary for its unique birds, and the ferry tickets sell out far in advance. We bought ours in August. As we waited to board the boat, we were surprised to see no other birders, and we ourselves were a bit of a curiosity to our fellow passengers, who were dressed for a day of swimming, sunbathing, and snorkeling. With our binoculars, cargo pants, cameras, and spotting scopes, we do stand out just a bit. This quickly grew into concern for us, as we feared that the ferry would not make its close pass by Hospital Key, as it customarily does for birders. Hospital Key is a small spit of sand and one of the few places to reliably find masked and brown boobies in the continental United States. When I asked the tour host about this, he gave me a very unsatisfactory, non-committal answer. Panic began to set in. Thankfully, the captain was on the boarding ramp as we boarded the ship, and when I approached him, I said, "Can I ask you a question?" Before I could continue, he took the words right out of my mouth. "Hospital Key," he smiled. "Please," I pleaded. "Yes," he said. If Ethan had not been standing right there, I think I might have kissed him. First used as a Civil War-era fort and later as a prison, mainly for Union deserters, Fort Jefferson on the Dry Tortugas sits 70 miles west of Key West and requires a 2.5-hour ferry ride each way or a seaplane trip to reach it. After 2 hours on the water, Fort Jefferson came into view on the horizon. We were getting close. Our pass by Hospital Key was so near we could taste it. As we got closer, we put up our binoculars and could just make out the white and brown blobs on the shore. Yes, both the brown boobies and mast boobies were there. As we got closer, our excitement grew and others on the bow worked hard to help us, offering us their front row views and dashing after our hats, yes, both of our hats, when they blew off.
When in the water today, please make sure you only touch water and sand. And if you have the ability to use that where you save sunscreen, please make sure you use that where you save sunscreen. How much protective overall is here to enjoy today? If you are camping.
Walking onto the island with plan in hand, we first made our way up to the second level of the fort and set our scope to overlook the old coaling dock. Garden Key is the nesting home of 4,000 brown noddies, a stunning life bird for us both, and one would have to be blind and deaf not to see hundreds of them on any day in May. But we were looking for 2 smaller, darker birds, black noddies, and we were prepared to spend several hours scanning the browns for the rare black.
Begin a long scoping process like was going to be involved in finding these black noddies. I like to go through a stretching, deep breathing, and meditation process. Ingrid sometimes gets a bit impatient, and she started looking through the scope before I, of course, was ready. And she said, "Oh, I got them. I got the noddies. I got the black noddies." And I thought, oh, isn't that clever? She thinks she's going to fool me, that she actually found the 2 black noddies out of the 4,000 in about 5 seconds. Well, I looked in the scope, and she did.
After high fives and hugs, we were off to find bridled terns. As with the black and brown noddies, there are thousands of sooty terns nesting by the fort, but only a few bridled terns. And of course, the 2 species look almost exactly alike. The sooty has a black back and wings, while the bridled has a dark gray back and wings. In April, we had met a fellow Maine birder in Hays, Kansas. Andy had described in detail how to find the terns. Fortunately, I had written down every word, and we headed to the broken rocks below the helicopter pad. Here is where we began to have trouble. Every path to the helicopter pad was blocked by "Area Closed" signs, a deliberate effort by the National Parks Department to prevent us from getting the turn. I had a brief view of one flying, but it disappeared from sight before Ethan had a chance to see it. Finally, we came upon a cement pylon on the beach near the helicopter pad. We stood on it, holding onto a dead tree for balance, and there were 2 bridal terns visible on their nest and only 20 feet away. And, miraculously, neither of us broke our neck. Next, we made an attempt to find the red-footed booby that another Mainer, Alex Lamoureux, had found on Long Key a few days earlier. Long Key is about a half-mile off of Garden Key, where Fort Jefferson sits, and is inaccessible to foot traffic due to nesting birds. Needless to say, finding a bird in a tree at this distance, even with a powerful scope, is a shot in the dark, but we had to try. We searched for and found a candidate, but did not see it clearly enough to make a confident ID. The balance of our 4 hours on the island was spent combing the trees for warblers, and we were happy to find a new species for the year for us, a worm-eating warbler, among numerous American redstarts, palm warblers, and a Cape May warbler. Returning to Key West, we were both thrilled and exhausted from our day, but enjoyed reliving every moment over dinner that evening. When we planned our big year, we promised ourselves we would take the time here and there to enjoy non-birding sights along the way. Never having been to Key West before, I was eager to see Duval Street and Hemingway's home, and Ethan, who has seen them before, was kind enough to indulge me with a visit to both before our return trip to the Miami airport and home to Maine, where spring migration is in full swing. More on that next week. Please tap the subscribe button below to follow our big year on YouTube. Happy birding!